Okay, welcome to Bardscast, talking to interesting people about interesting things. If it's interesting to me, that's good enough. And this man certainly is. I'm Carlin Barsley, as always, and I'm joined by an old friend of mine, a true friend of mine, someone that I hold a great deal of esteem for, and I hope the feeling is mutual. A guy I've known for a lot of years, and we've talked about a lot of people punching each other in the face for years now. The one, the only, Mr. Canadian MMA, James Lynch.
Well, thank you. What an intro that is. I don't think anyone's been that nice to me, so I appreciate it. And I want to point out I'm not being paid to be here. You'd think that's the case, but no, thank you very much for having me on, man. It's good to catch up with you. I'm always keeping tabs on what is going on in the strange man in a strange land type stuff. But no, it's good to talk to you again, man. It doesn't feel like it's been that long ago, but even though it kind of has, so.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of nice that the two of us seem to be always able to just kind of pick up wherever we left off, and I think that's the mark of a good friendship. And you say you're not being paid, but I am up at the ass crack of dawn my time.
I will give you credit for that. You're not a morning person. That's one thing you and I have always been opposites. You've been a night guy, I've been a morning guy. I've always been that way. So.
Yeah, so we found a way to make it work, and I'm again really happy to talk to you. And I want to say congratulations on the gig at the Score. I mean, that's one of the coveted spots in Canadian sports. Really, there's TSN, there's Sportsnet, there's the Score, and now you're the point man at the Score. How's it feel, brother?
It feels great. I do wake up every day thinking, how did I pull this off? I mean, obviously, I have put in a lot of work over the years, but like you said, it's full-time jobs in this industry are few and far between. It was really out of the blue, honestly. Like, I didn't even think of the Score as, like, I didn't apply for the job. They came to me, and that's not like a humble brag or anything. I'm telling you what happened. Like, literally, and I bring this up because, like, I did not even think it was a possibility. Like, I was doing my thing. I was happy being a freelancer. I was working a lot of hours, but I was in control of everything, which was great, where it's like I could pick and choose when I wanted to do things. I could make my own schedule. I could, if I wanted to work really hard on a Monday, I could take Thursday off if I wanted to, right? Like, it's just, there was a lot of freedom in that. And I kind of figured out how to do that as far as like a system. Now, it wasn't easy. I mean, there were times when, I switched different outlets. I mean, certain outlets, they're losing money or whatever, you have to move around a little bit. So, I mean, it's not 100% stable, but there was some freedom in that. And then, yeah, they just came to the plate. And for me, it's like, obviously being a dad and a husband and everything, the benefits were a big part of it. And the paid travel. I mean, that was a big thing with me as well, taking this is, being able to not have to self-fund me covering events, because that's pretty much how it was for years before that. If I wanted to go cover a UFC or Bellator or whatever, it was all out of my own pocket, and I would have to hope that I would make enough ad revenue off of my channel to actually like break even. So that takes some of the stress out of it as well, but it's been good. I mean, and I've learned a lot. I mean, that's the big thing, I think, since I've started. I think on the 13th, I'll come up to, 5 months or 6 months, I think. I've learned so much in this short period of time, and I think it's only making me better.
I love your gimmick where you're just sitting around with guys playing video games. Like, because one of my main concerns, or I guess not concerns, but complaints about MMA coverage is that a lot of it is just so samey, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, you could pretty much cookie cutter a lot of this shit, but you found something that is different, that is fun, that is engaging, really, because nothing brings out the personality more in the fighters than they're trying to beat you at NHL 94 or Street Fighter or whatever you guys happen to be playing. Like, well, where did that germinate in the back of your head? How'd you make that a reality?
So it's actually funny, like years ago, I'm talking when I was in maybe high school, I saw James Sobalski, if you remember him, used to work for the Score, the television network, like way back in the day. He did something like that with Todd Bertuzzi when Bertuzzi played for the Canucks and they were playing a game of NHL and they did an interview. Now, they did a little bit differently where I don't think they actually showed the game. They were just sort of hanging out. And I thought that's a really good idea. And as you know, Carlin, I'm a big retro gamer. I love playing my retro games. It's great for me because, like,
yeah, you
I don't have
cheat
a lot
like hell too.
Apparently that's what I hear. So no, but like it's not time consuming for me. That's why I like playing the old games. So it literally was like last year, I think at UFC 223, I had my retro gaming system with me and I was covering the event with our mutual friend Steve Jeffrey, and he's all into that as well. And we just kind of came up with the idea. We're like, why don't we just play with the fighters? And we did the first one, and a lot of people liked it. Like it's kind of weird, the whole format of it, because like I get really good feedback on it, but the views aren't like anything out of this world. So it has been sort of a tough sell to certain outlets when I did it. With the score right now, it's still kind of a battle. They're not 100% sold on it. But this last one I did with Gegard, I knew it would turn out well, and that's the first time I've had like a big fighter on it, because normally it was just sort of prelim guys or whatever. So that's why it did so well, even to the point of where I was getting feedback from like John Gooden and like other like notable people in the industry. So, I mean, the views were good. They weren't outstanding, but I think it's something where I've kind of explained to my boss, it's like, it's an investment, like I think the more fighters see this, the more they're going to want to do it. Like even Gegard, while we were doing the interview, he liked it because like he's being asked, what do you think of the Machida rematch? What do you think about you saying him about his steroids? Like I asked those things, but I got him in an environment where he's not, the wall isn't up. He's not doing a typical media day. He's playing Street Fighter. He's against me, right? So it's a little bit different.
Yeah, the comparison I draw, and I'm not sure if you're going to follow the line on this, but I look at it almost like Hot Ones, right? Mm-hmm. The Hot Wing show, where you've got someone in that environment, but because you're doing something else, the guard's a bit down more. They're not concentrating so much on giving the correct answer. They're just kind of going off the cuff because, on Hot Ones, they're, fucking losing their shit because it's
super hot,
the spiciness of it all. And in your case, they're just concentrating on not dying in the video game. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that works. Now, how do you market that? Like you said that people at the Score aren't exactly all in on it yet, and I'm sure they will be. But is it? Do you market it again towards just the MMA audience? Do you try to hashtag, retro gamers and stuff like that, or how's that work?
It's mainly to the MMA audience because I think, there's a lot of retro gaming channels out there, people playing old games. I don't think it's really I'm catering to them. I'm catering to the MMA audience who wants something different. Look, I'm fully aware of what's going on in the industry right now as far as, who we're up against. I mean, we started this YouTube channel from scratch in May. I made a point of doing that because even though I think their regular channel, I can't remember how many subscribers they had, but I said, look, like we can't just assume that everyone who's an MMA fan is also a fan of, hockey and football and all that. So I don't want to muddle the content on one channel. I said, we got to start from scratch. We'll make the sacrifice with it, but at least this way people will know everything MMA is going to be on this channel. And the other thing I'm up against is that we have, channels like MMA Fighting that has like almost 1 million subscribers. I mean, think about that. That's years and years of Ariel building up his brand and putting it on there. You have MMA Junkie who's had, years as well of building that up. So we're already at a disadvantage. So my thinking is, well, the way I'm going to win this thing is by giving people something different. And so if you're playing video games, that's not something you're going to see on MMA Fighting. If we're, doing different segments, like we do different things. My Pros Picks videos have migrated over there. I know some sites try and do something similar to it, but really I'm the one who's sort of been doing that over the years. And then we're trying out some other new stuff too, where we're just trying to find little lanes of where we can take advantage, because really like ever since, Fight Network went away, there really hasn't been a lot of emphasis on video content in terms of like creative stuff. Like a lot, like Will Harris, for example, is doing like the Anatomy of a Fighter, which is cool. UFC's doing their embedded thing, but like actual like segments, we're not seeing a lot of things like that. So that's where I'm trying to win this thing as far as, and when I say win, it's sort of like a business term, but I mean like just getting ahead or finding ways where people are going to watch our content over someone else. Because when I go to an event, everyone's posting the same media scrum. Everyone's posting a lot of the same stuff. So we have to find ways to differentiate between that. And I feel like we've done a good job of that. And that's why, since I started May 13th, we're at over 4 million views on the channel. We're at 10.6 thousand subscribers. I mean, it took me 4 years to get 10,000 subscribers on my own channel. I've done it in a couple months here. So it's been great.
That's cool. What is up with Fight Network now? Do they still exist? I'm in Taiwan, so I'm out of the loop.
Like it's actually funny. So I saw another mutual friend of ours actually last week in LA, Robin Black, because Robin's working for DAZN right now.
Great guy, yeah.
Amazing guy, yeah. And we sort of talked about that because, Fight Network had a choice a couple of years ago. I mean, they were sort of at the peak. I remember, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, when they had their UFC rights back and they were flying to events and they were doing coverage and it was all really great. And they were sort of ahead of the curve because they were a television network. Whereas, I know Sportsnet was doing their thing and, you had other outlets as well, but really a lot of these sites were just websites. So they didn't really have that video background. So Fight Network was doing cool stuff. Like we talked about my video game thing. Robin had a segment that he used to do with fighters called Armbar, where he would take them to a bar, they would drink, and they would, talk about stuff. And that was sort of the birth of, what we're seeing, which is, just different segments outside of there. So what happened was, they got really popular, and then the CEO, for whatever reason, and you're gonna, just knowing how much you disdain pro wrestling, like he just decided, hey, I'm gonna buy TNA or whatever it is, Impact Wrestling. And with that came a cost, which was gutting the entire department. So they, that was the time when they fired Robin and Ramdean. I think Pollock and Way were still there at that time, but they had gutted a lot of their, people there, and basically said that, look, we own this, this library of content with the UFC stuff and, now TNA. We're going to focus more on programming, not as much on news. Now, look, I think they made a mistake, to be honest, even before they bought Impact, in the sense that they were giving away a lot of their stuff for free. Like, I could go on their YouTube channel and I could watch, Robin's Armbar episodes, and I could watch all the stuff. There's no way they're making enough ad revenue off YouTube to pay for all of that of what they're doing. What they should have done was either develop an app or create like a Patreon and have something behind the wall where you're having to pay a premium to see this content. Because it's like, really, like, if I'm getting to watch all this on YouTube for free, why am I buying the channel? Like, other than the live content, but even that, I think at the time you could still get it on Fight Pass. So to me, I think they failed in that way as well. But it's too bad, because I think if they could have figured out a way, the nucleus of what they had there with Pollock, with Robin, with Ramdean, I think it would have been something so huge, and they missed the ball. So what sort of the snowball effect from that was they bought Impact, and then they were covering a bit of MMA, like some programming, some features, and then they went completely into pro wrestling, and they ditched like Pollock and Way, who are now, by the way, doing very successful things with post wrestling now. And a lot of the other people have moved on to sort of better things, but now it's just a programming channel, and they just bought Access TV. I'm sure you saw that. And they, they gutted LFA. Like, the LFA is now looking for a broadcast partner. Impact is now on that channel. I don't know how they're going to survive. I don't know enough about the TV side of it, but it doesn't sound like things are good if they're trying to buy up all these properties and hoping that the ratings are going to come in. Because I even know some casual wrestling fans. I don't know how many people actually watch Impact.
Yeah, well, I guess the long story short, pro wrestling ruins everything again. But Anthem is the parent company. Am I right on that? So
they are, yeah.
Yeah, what are they trying to get out of an Access TV purchase if they're gutting the live programming?
Well, I think the thought was that Access is airs in the States, like on like sort of like a normal network there, and I believe they had Impact on like a fishing channel or something. So I think they needed, they had this, they paid all this money for this property. Now they wanted a good place to actually show it. And I think even Fight Network, their channel in the States, like, isn't like high up on the grid. So with Access, it kind of gives them an advantage there to
Access, put it on. I used to watch when my parents lived in Kansas City. It was channel 583 or some fucking bullshit. So I think it's not exactly top tier,
Yeah, no, I don't know enough about that. Like, that's just sort of what I've heard from people, but it's just, yeah, like I said, I mean, kind of the way I look at the whole thing is it's just disappointing. They had so much potential of what they could have done with it. And it's, granted, other outlets are benefiting from it now, but still, it's just super like a bummer to see what could have been with that network.
So is it, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm hearing from you, are they just throwing good money after bad to sustain this purchase of a wrestling promotion? Or am I
think
just
so, yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think, and I think part of it too is I know for a fact there's people that are still working there that are getting paid six figures that are not doing, like, they're not bringing in their value, if that makes sense. Like, they're really relying on this programming to work out, when really they could have hired a couple content people, tried to create original content like they were doing, and probably get back to where they are. But instead, they're going the opposite way. They're relying on programming to lead the charge. And to me, in this day and age, like, with how easy it is to get access to programming, it's a bad idea, in my opinion. But what do I know?
Well, clearly more than what they know. I mean, like, a guy like you would never, make sure that Robin Black, a guy of his talent, a guy of his stature, a guy of his skill, a guy of his heart, for that matter, is doing, fight breakdowns of cats on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just, for them, it's about relying on programming instead for whatever reason. And yeah, I mean, hopefully it works out. I mean, I think I know like one person who still works there, but pretty much everyone else has been like let go and doing different things now. So it's, but that's television. I mean, I knew that. That's one of the reasons I left. I mean, back in 2011, I think is when I left. Granted, I sort of had the foresight where I was like, I need to make more money. I got to make a move here. Cause like, it was just, there was no way I could continue. I loved working there, but I can't make nothing. And I hear it didn't get much better after I left, as far as some of the people and how much they were making. And you gotta make strides. I think that's the big thing. So.
So with the score, has there been any talk about a television component to this, or what's going
No, I
on?
mean they're set on being a digital app. One of the smart things they did when they were bought by Sportsnet. So if you, I mean, I'm going to go back memory lane a little bit here. So when they had the TV channel, Sportsnet bought them. They rebranded it to Sportsnet 360, and they basically just, I think they got rid of a lot of people. But what the smart thing the Score did was they kept their app and their website, and that was sort of revolutionary at the time because if you remember when they had the app, there weren't a lot of people were late to the party with their app. TSN, for example, Sportsnet, they were all late getting in on that game, but the Score was so
Sportsnet's
far ahead.
app still sucks, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And TSN, I hear the same thing. And you could go across the board with a lot of other outlets as well, that the app just isn't up to par. But the Score decided to invest a lot of money in that. So they were smart when they sold that. They kept the app, they kept the website. So what's happening now is they are, as far as what I know, is they have like basically, they started with like a small group of people, and now it's getting so big because that app is so popular. It's the second largest app in North America behind ESPN, which if you think about that, that's pretty significant.
Wow, yeah.
So they're now getting back to prominence. And the reason I sort of came in as far as what I found out after was that they kind of neglected MMA because they were still building up all these other properties. They were building up football. They were building up, NHL and all this content. And again, their philosophy was, we have this really good tool, this really good platform in the app. We're going to try and make it so it's easy and accessible. And it is. It's still ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. So now they're at the point where they're bringing in more people. And yeah, they basically, I think they just even when I got hired, they said this is kind of like a make it your own role. And I said, look, if I'm coming on here, I spent years building this brand. I'm not going to go behind the camera. I'm not going to just be an editor. I want to be doing my video content, and they let me do it. And it's, they're seeing the success in that with what's happened. And I knew if I got on a big platform, I could do more. And so that's sort of what you're seeing now with what's been going on there. And it's just me, but the system they have kind of works where they have, me doing my, Monday to Friday, whatever. And I go cover events as well. But, the major news, they're only really worried about that. If there's like a prelim announcement, we don't need to get to that stuff. They're more worried about the big name stuff. And even then, when I'm off hours, they have like an NFL team that handles all the MMA news. So they'll get to that while I'm away. So it's kind of a well-oiled machine. And then my job is just original content and obviously, writing news as well, but not as it's not the focus is more on the content. And I think that's where we're going to get ahead is trying to create original stuff as opposed to a lot of these sites. Because I can tell you, Carlin, when I was a freelancer, I worked for almost 6 websites, and I'll tell you, a lot of them are the same thing. It's just, hey, Ariel did an interview with Jeremy Stevens. He had this quote about, I'm going to kill him. I'm just making this up. I don't know if Jeremy Stevens actually said that, but it sounds like it's something he would say. And every site will aggregate that quote and put it on their own site. And because it's all clickbait based, right? And we're doing that a little bit with the news, but I'm really trying to get away from that because then we're just going to end up like every other site. We need to create original content. And that's where I come in and try and, use my contacts, use my creativity with my video ideas and try and give people something a little bit different.
Yeah, that's very interesting you bring that up because that's kind of one of the things that has kind of pushed me away from following the sport as much as I have in the past is that, again, everything is so samey and there's just so much clickbait. Like, I don't need to know what pair of shoes Conor McGregor bought. I don't want to know what Ronda Rousey is thinking about 5 years away from the sport or whatever it's been, right? And how do you avoid stuff like that? Because, they say it's the clicks that drive the revenue, and you're always pitching to the lowest common denominator at that point. People like stupid shit, for lack of a better term. So how do you maintain a following like the Score has without succumbing to the usual trappings?
Because you do a mix. And so I don't just focus on clickbait. I give them, different stuff like the pros picks. That's still a popular segment. I mean, the video I just did on Whitaker and Adesanya is at 180,000 views. I mean, that's really good numbers, right? So I think there's stuff like that. And that's not really clickbaity. That's just an opinion thing. Although it's funny, you read the comments, people are like, oh, I know more than these fighters. Well, it's like, dude, it's an opinion video. It's not called UFC experts pick. It's called pros picks. They're professional fighters. They're giving their opinion. Relax. Like there's this weird complex fans have where they want to show, I think there's this jealousy within fans where they wish they could fight. So their way of compensating for it is making comments like, I know more than you do. It's like, No, like we can see your insecurity from like a mile away. Like this is what you're getting at, you know? So it's like, I find that stuff kind of funny, but yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question, like I don't cover, like you know, unless it's something like really, like for example, Conor McGregor tweeted the other day that, you know, what date is the BMF belt? And every site ran with it. I did not. I thought that was stupid. Unless Conor says something significant, like, hey, I think he had something where, you know, he said he wanted to fight Poirier. Like that's a little bit significant because at least we're talking about an opponent, but him being ambiguous and you know, cryptic, I mean, that doesn't interest me. So you know, we'll grab some stuff like that. I don't grab, like I'm really kind of conscious of what stuff I want on there and what I don't. I mean, I sort of have final say with that. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say one of the things that I do a good job of is like, you know, when we do have breaking news, like let's say a matchup gets announced, you know, we'll get that up right away. We'll send an alert on the app. That's another advantage we have. We send these alerts. So if you have notifications, like you can get them right away. So if you know, you could be out doing grocery shopping, you'll get an alert on your phone if you want it on the app, and it'll say, hey, breaking, you know, Colby Covington's fighting Usman, right? But what I do too, and that's something I've kind of done over the years that I found successful, is I'll do a quick video on that. Hey, this is the matchup. This is my quick thoughts. This is who I think might win this fight, whatever. A lot of people don't do that. You remember back in the day, like CNN, it would be like breaking news. You know, this is, you know, a cat is, you know,
we now cut to this car chase.
But do you notice, like, I notice a lot of, like, I don't see a lot of people immediately reacting to news. And I might be giving away kind of a secret here, but I found that doing that is another thing that really, because people, when they see news, they want to be able to talk about it, right? So one of the things I've done is, like I said, I post the video up, I write something in the comment section, hey, what do you think of this fight? Whatever, you know, let's hear your opinion. And it's been good too. So those are other ways. Like I don't really consider that clickbait because that's just me giving an opinion on a fight. So it's not like me saying like if Conor McGregor had said, you know, what's the BMF date, and I did a reaction video on that, then yeah, fair enough. That's total clickbait. But I try and not do as much clickbait as I can. So I find the balance of original content and, you know, major news stuff is worked so far. I mean, I haven't heard any complaints. So
is it hard to maintain independence in an industry that we all know you pretty much have to be a lapdog to have a seat at the table?
I think there are ways. I mean, look, I think, you know, I sort of have my sort of opinion on this is a lot of the people who want this to be sort of a, you know, true journalistic, you know, coverage and ask the tough questions. Like, I think you can do a bit of both, but it'll never be 100%. There's just too many politics going on in this sport where, you know, you can't. It's an access game, unfortunately. Like if you get your UFC, like look at Josh Gross, there's a good example, right? Like he still doesn't have UFC credentials. The guy works at The Athletic now. Like he absolutely should have credentials, and he's survived and he's made it through, and that's great that he's like a true journalist that he's been able to do that. But there are politics here, and you do have to sort of play ball in that regard. And it is a struggle sometimes. I mean, I've had interviews blocked. I've had managers upset. I've had fighters upset with me over nothing. Like it's just you have to sort of be aware of what's happening and just navigate through it the best you can. But I mean, I hear the complaints and I think some of them are valid, but I also think people need to look at, like, at the end of the day, like, you know, people who complain about the clickbait stuff. I'm not saying you necessarily, but like there are people that will complain about it, but then it's like, yeah, but you guys consume it. If you didn't consume this clickbait stuff, then people wouldn't be, you know, tuning into it as much. You know what I mean? So it kind of goes hand in hand with the, you know, playing the game thing where it's like, yeah, I mean, you know, you could get a controversial, like a Greg Hardy on, and, you know, you don't ask them the softball question. Like you give them softball questions and people are like, why didn't you bring up the, you know, the past allegations and everything? You know, people have a right to be upset by that. But at the same time, like if you just go hard at Greg Hardy on that, he's not going to give you an interview. So it's like, it's this balancing act. So to answer your question, it is hard at times, but you just have to be aware of it and just navigate through it the best you can. I can't make everyone happy. It's the reality. It's the internet. No one's happy.
It's the internet. No one's happy. So like, where does your moral compass take you though? Because let's face it, this is a dirty business, right?
Yeah.
And we knew that going in, right? Mm-hmm. So is it more, all right, I'm going to get a ticket to UFC. I'm going to get, you know, a line in the buffet. I'm going to be able to feed my children, or I can actually do something of, you know, relevance, right? I can do something along the lines of what John Nash or Kareem Zidane or, you know, the people that are doing it right are doing. Like, how do you find your line, I guess is my question.
I try and do it in a way that's respectful. You know what I mean? Like I think if something absolutely has to be asked, then you ask it, but you have to do it in a way where it's not like I can't, were you at the press conference with McGregor and Aldo? Were you at that whole situation?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You were there and you remember what happened at that where, I'm not going to mention his name. You know who we're talking about here. Asked the question about pay, but the problem was how he did it was that he did it in a way where it was like the first question of the presser. Like, you obviously you're there to do the press conference. He's within his right to do that. I'm not saying he's not, but like there is sort of a politics in this where I feel like had he asked that later in the press conference, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. And then when Dana told him to shut up and sit down, he yelled back at him, and it's like, of course you're not going to get your credentials back. Like, yes, he was, I'm sure being, he's being a true journalist, but there's also like the consequence to it, which is that. So I think for me, it's like, if it's something like that absolutely has to be asked, you have to do it in sort of a respectful manner. But at the same time, like you have to be careful with what you say because there is, you need those credentials. Like in my situation, like I do the best I can. I that's sort of the best way I can answer it is that like, yeah, I'm sure there's stuff I could push harder on, but that's because I'm aware of the climate I'm working in.
Fair enough. So how has it changed? I mean, like you've been in the game forever, basically,
Yeah.
right? And I think we both became fans as late teens, early 20s, something like that, and it's guided us towards our middle age. And what I remember about it is that like it was almost like, I don't want to say cult, but it was almost like a collective, right?
Yeah.
Because we all had to try so hard to watch content. I mean, you had to stay up till 3 a.m. To tape Pride or something like that, right? You had to trade different VHS tapes with people, and we all seem to have this this opinion or this feeling that okay, boxing has gone completely corrupt. This is our chance to do it right, right? This is our chance to make a dent. Right. That's what I remember the collective, the collective thought process being. Now looking back on it with 2019 eyes, were we all just naive or, did it go wrong somewhere along the way? Because I don't see a whole lot of difference between UFC and boxing as far as business models go in 2019. In fact, I think one could make the argument UFC has gotten worse.
Yeah, I think where we were naive is that I think people neglected the fact that the UFC was running their business like the WWE than they were running it like an actual sport, in the sense that the brand is the most important thing. And if you disregard the brand, we're going to, you have no other choice. You want to go somewhere else and fight? Good luck. We don't care. I think that's been a big thing with the UFC over the years where like, for example, like I just go back to like when we thought that maybe Vanderlei Silva would come over and fight in the UFC. Eventually did, but it was after when they were trying to do it, or when Fedor was going to come over, and all those things never ended up happening. Like if this was a true sport, they would have done whatever they had to do to get that done. But the UFC was so concerned with their brand. I think M1 wanted to co-promote if they wanted Fedor over there. Like, so then the UFC ended up buying Pride, and that still didn't even get them Fedor at the time. And that's, I think, and also I think I like, I do miss sort of the days when you would have like, a couple fights like here and there a month. And then you had like the pay-per-view that you're really like, there was so much anticipation for it. Now I can't catch my breath. We just had UFC Copenhagen last weekend. We had Bellator 228. We had the boxing fight last weekend. And now we're right back at it this weekend. We've got 243. Like I haven't even really had a chance to like enjoy the build up to 243 because I was covering Bellator last week. So it's like, there's a lot. And like, if you remember back in the day, like it was like cool to be like an MMA fan. Now it's like everyone kind of knows about it. And then, you get like the really casual fans. Like I even get them. They're like, and it's annoying to talk to them where they're like, oh, you think GSP is going to come back and fight Anderson? Like, I don't know. Like, that type of like annoying talk. But yeah, I mean, I think to kind of get to your original question, I think that, yeah, we were a little bit naive. I think that we thought this thing was going to be, that the sport was going to be like a real sport. And I feel like that entertainment side of it is sort of tipped over even more now where it's like getting almost ridiculous. Like you're seeing like Henry Cejudo and, I know people don't like Covington, but obviously some of the stuff I don't mind, but other stuff obviously has gone too far and whatever. Like, but fighters are having to do that because like they just won't get noticed because the UFC's done such a poor job of promoting certain fighters and they're not on that sort of casual level, So I think that's part of it too. They don't have superstars. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, why don't they have superstars? Because in the past, they've obviously let people like GSP, Connor, Chuck, Brock, they've let them take up the oxygen. Now it seems like unless you're doing something ridiculous and gimmicky, like you mentioned the Cejudo stuff and Colby Covington. I'm disappointed saying the guy's name, but I guess I have to now that he's beat Lawler, right? So
Mhm.
it's where has the UFC's style changed in that regard? Is was it with the Endeavor purchase? Is it now? All right, as long as we're making our debt service payments, we're okay. Uh, you know, because in my opinion, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? If
It's
you've
true, yeah.
got if you've got a golden goose like a Connor or a GSP or Chuck back in the day or whoever, I mean that's gonna even Tito, right? Back in the
Yeah.
day, like that's gonna draw more eyeballs, and more eyeballs translate to more revenue. Now, for the most part, it's like fighter A versus fighter B under the UFC banner. Why should I care? And if there's no reason for me to care, why am I watching?
Well, there's a couple things there. Two of those names you mentioned, Conor McGregor and George St. Pierre, they had the added benefit of being like representing something. So for George, a lot of people forget that not only did he represent Canada, but he represented French Canadians as well. So that's a huge market, right? So you're getting sort of the combination of that. And George was never like a big self promoter. Like he was sort of this like upstanding like role model, whatever, and people sort of looked up to that. And it really played it well into the sort of the Canadian stereotype of us being like polite and all this stuff. So that all kind of helped. That was what the perfect storm was. And at the time, if you remember, like I remember when they went to Canada for the first time, like it was new. There was like this big thing. So that helped. And with McGregor, it was like we had never really seen someone like him before. Like, yes, there was Chael Sonnen and what he was able to do with trash talk and stuff, but McGregor was actually like the perfect storm at the time because like he not only like represented Ireland, so you have all these Irish fans who were just dying for someone to like break through and become this big star, but Conor was winning and he was winning big. He was knocking out, Chad Mendes, knocking out Aldo and, getting these big wins. So it was sort of this perfect storm. And he got so big to the point of where he was even able to go convince boxing, people that he could go fight Floyd Mayweather. Like, think how crazy that is, right? So, Conor was sort of at a time when the UFC, again, I think was still struggling to, market fighters good, but Conor's such a good self-promoter that it didn't matter. They could have done nothing and they could have put Conor on the prelims. He's still getting people's attention because he was such a good trash talker. So I think that played into it a little bit, but I think the biggest thing that has hurt the UFC, and I have no problem saying this, is there's too many damn events. Like, it doesn't mean as much to get in the UFC. Do you remember when like someone would get signed and it was such a big deal? And now it's like someone will get signed on a short notice opportunity. They could have like a 6-4 record. It doesn't matter because it's like, it's just, they need to fill up cards. They're doing too many cards. If they had like a break in between every week, let's say they did like a fight night a month, a pay-per-view a month, that's still 2 events a month. I think that would be a significant upgrade because now it's just like, it's a fatigue. Like even me, like when it comes to like fight night cards, especially, I'll PVR it. I don't have time to sit through and watch 6 straight hours. So I'll PVR it, I'll skip the commercials and I'll watch it later. That's usually how I do it and even though I'm on a better time zone now, 3 hours behind, it's a lot easier. I can't imagine what people have to do, staying up late till because I used to do it at like 1 a.m. back east, but a lot of it I'll just watch after the fact and just focus on the fights and not all the filler. But man, like they're asking a lot out of the fans to like tune in every week. And their thing is just like, we're going to put on as much as we can. We have this ESPN deal. They need content. We'll see what happens. But the reality is you're getting a lot of subpar fighters. You're getting guys that aren't ready. I can give you an entire list of fighters who made it to the UFC too early, went 0-2, got cut, and they'll probably never be back. And you kind of ruin people that way, right? So I think that's played a big role in the marketing is where like, it's just, there's too many fighters. There's too many people to keep track of. The UFC has tried. I will give them some credit. Like they had Amanda Nunes on Ellen. Like Ellen just doesn't get anyone on her show, right? Like that's a huge deal. They've had, fighters on late night shows and stuff, but they really missed the ball with how to market certain fighters. Other sports have seemed to be better. And I think it's also the fighters themselves. Like they haven't had like a really good, like American, like boisterous, like, someone really since Sonnen, if you think about it, like Jones is obviously he's good at trash talking on social media and stuff, but like, as far as his interviews, like it's nothing like earth shattering, you know what I mean? So I think that's played into it. There's a number of factors, but yeah, I think it's like and boxing struggled with that too. Like they haven't like only recently I feel like boxing is sort of making a bit of a comeback with some of their names, like with Deontay Wilder and they have Anthony Joshua and they have this Ruiz guy who came out of nowhere. Like that's something they could build on. But yeah, I think with the UFC it's just been it's been a lot of negatives together. But I think it starts and ends with them doing too many events.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is just fatigue that way because I can't keep up with it, especially because, your Saturday night is my Sunday morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to get up early in the morning, we know this, James, this is not my thing. If I'm going to get up early in the morning, it's got to be for something substantial. And for my money, they're just not throwing enough substantial at me. And you said, well, where's, the American, great hope or whatever. The last fight I got really excited for was Nate Diaz's comeback, right? Diaz versus Pettis. I was like, this is destination programming. I made sure that, that me and the people I care about here were in front of a screen at that time to watch this man come back and do his thing. And of course, it wound up being a great fight and a great win for Nate Diaz. And then all of a sudden, all that talk of Dana White, he doesn't move the needle. I don't know if he really wants to fight because he wants a fair deal, right? All that talk turned, and now they're fighting for their goofy little belt, which I don't really mind because it's a gimmick, right? The BMF belt, it's a gimmick.
You don't like pro wrestling, so why? I think you wouldn't like that.
Well, because I'm not taking it seriously, right?
Well, I think and that's another issue I have with the UFC is that they have this fixation on every pay-per-view has to be a title fight. That's stupid. I mean, you have first off, it's just too tough to do that. Like they're going to screw themselves next year because 245, as much as I'm super glad I'm going to that card and covering it. I mean, that's going to be one of the cards of the year. They have 3 title fights on there. How the hell are they going to do a pay-per-view in January or February or you're just going to have to get someone that's not as popular to headline that? That's a tough sell. That's the problem. And you're seeing that, even this, the 243 card this weekend, you got Israel and Whitaker, which is one of the best fights of all time in the middleweight division, one of the best fights in the UFC ever. But outside of that, that's not a strong card. I mean, that looks more like a fight night if I'm being honest. And that's because they've stacked 244, they stacked 241. This is what happens. They can't sustain what they're doing. They can, but you're going to get subpar stuff.
Just want to pivot back to Diaz, though.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I want to talk to him about him too. I have some points, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is for my money, he's as popular as anyone in the UFC. When I talk to people, even here, about UFC, Nate Diaz's name is always top of mind. Does the UFC realize how popular Nate Diaz is?
I think they do because they're getting him to headline this mega card in New York. I think if it was, anyone else, and Nate Diaz is an interesting case because I think it's a combination of things as to why he's so popular. Number one, obviously him beating McGregor will forever give him God status. He was sort of the, people hated McGregor because he was so cocky. Nate Diaz was getting one up for the guys that aren't about the trash talk and stuff. He's the guy that's stopped that. So that will ever cement him in there because if you remember before that, I can tell you how frustrating it was to watch Diaz fight when he's fighting Rafael dos Anjos and not stopping a takedown. And you're getting to the point where it's just like his brother, where it's are you guys ever going to learn how to stop a takedown? It was getting to that point where I was just I wasn't.
Or check a leg kick.
Yeah. It was getting to that point where you're almost this is there's nothing exciting about this. So it was a combination of that. And you know what I think made Diaz, that fight with Pettis so much bigger than it needed to be was that he did take that time off. And we talked about with the events, that anticipation, if Diaz fought Pettis a month or two after he fought McGregor, I don't think that fight's nearly as big as it was when we saw it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I mean, you have to give people time to miss you, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think McGregor, when he does return, I think that will be a little bit bigger because he has taken sort of a year off. But I don't know what they're going to do with him. But anyways, yeah, you were saying about Nate Diaz.
Yeah, because where I'm sitting, Nate is he's one of those guys, like you say, he's almost the everyman, right? You go out and you watch some of the YouTube videos, the trash talking between McGregor and Diaz prior to the first fight, especially. It's McGregor giving soliloquies and Nate picking up the microphone saying you're on steroids and then putting it back down, and you can tell who's winning the mental battle. And I don't think we ever saw that before. I don't think we ever saw Conor rattled before, right? Mm-hmm. Because I remember this clear as a bell because it was the last time I was in Canada. I was watching the weigh-ins, and they're doing the face-off, and you just saw Diaz kind of head check him like that, and you saw Conor back off, and then I'm like, wait a second, Nate Diaz is going to win this fight. Conor's not in Nate's head, Nate's in Conor's. And so I got him at 4-1, and that was, wound up being a substantial good thing for me. But
yeah,
I think that Diaz speaks to that kind of MMA fan, and it's just like, you know what? We don't have a whole lot of things, right? We're not Conor McGregor. We're not walking around in the designer suits and have the fancy cars and everything like that. We're more working class people, for lack of a better term. And what I wonder is if UFC isn't kind of missing the boat on, because clearly they didn't want to promote Nick as well back in the day until they had no other choice, right? I'm wondering, is that the same attitude they have towards Nate, or is it more, well, hey, they want more money, we're not going to give them more money because we've got, just, fighter X that we can roll in, pay a tenth of the money, and recover most of that revenue.
I think that's part of their brand, though. And I think you can't market either of those fighters because they're not going to show up. Remember, Nick missed the press conference. Diaz for this 241, because I was
who gives a fuck about a press conference, though, really? It's like Allen Iverson. Practice?
No, but that's what I'm saying, though. Like how would you promote them, though, is my question. Like that would involve them probably doing like late night or something, like, right? Like when I think of promotion, I think of them being out there, but like they're not going to show up. Like that's their brand. Like that's like Nate, I was at Media Day at 241. Nate Diaz had a card. We found out 10 minutes later, Nate ain't coming. And I had no issue with that. I mean, obviously it sucked because like you're there for Diaz. That's what gets the hits. But, that's their brand. I think they wouldn't, I think they are promoting him the right way by not promoting him because that's his brand. He's mysterious, right?
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Khabib didn't show up for his presser against Poirier either, though. But you don't seem to hear the same kind of
but that's
vitriol.
not really Khabib. Yeah, that's more Khabib just saying whatever. I'm doing too much media. It's not the same. Whereas Diaz, like he's sort of known as this rebel, this guy who does his own thing. The guy was smoking up at the open workouts, which I don't know how he passed that test. I was there. That wasn't CBD. Unless CBD has, I've never actually seen anyone smoke CBD before. If it has the same smell, fair enough. But the first thing I thought is, man, he's going to get in trouble with the commission, but apparently not. So maybe it was CBD and I've never smelt it, but I don't know anyone who's ever smoked CBD around me ever. It's always the other stuff.
Yeah, then that's another good point too. He does kind of have that anti-hero persona, but with him, it's genuine, I think, right?
Yeah.
When you see someone like a Cejudo or like a Colby Covington, and it's just like, dude, you're trying so fucking hard right now. Can you just like ease off a bit? Pump the brakes a little bit. I haven't, I'm sorry to say, watched your interview with Covington yet, but when you're in that position, like how do you deal with a figure like that is clearly trying to get all the pre-rehearsed lines in?
You just prepare for the climate. I mean, he said some really controversial stuff during that interview, and I move along. I just kind of, I can't, like, look, a real journalist would be like, you said this, but actually, like, this, like he said, for example, he said that like Usman has like pillow hands. He hasn't knocked anyone out. Usman knocked out Sergio Moraes. Am I going to call him on that? No, you got to let the gimmick go. Yeah. In my head, unfortunately, this is the way that sort of the climate works is like, I need the good quote from him. If I start checking Colby on everything he says, I'm not going to get what I want, and people aren't going to watch the interview as much as they want. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's not true journalism, but I'm dealing with Colby here. Now, if it's someone else and they're not doing a shtick and it's whatever and they're doing something dumb, yeah, I'll call them on that. But it's different. You have to sort of play with this thing, and it's not true journalism, but with something like that, you have to look at the quote you're going to get because people aren't going to watch it. That's just the reality. Trust me, I of all people where I've interviewed, I don't know how many prospects. If people really cared about the growth of the sport, they would watch those interviews. But I'll be lucky if those get 100 views. And that's something where, even to my bosses, I have to convince them, like, look, we still got to cover the prospects here. It's like you don't see the NHL ignoring the World Juniors. Like you need that coverage of the up and comers. But the people just don't watch it, and they only watch it if there's some juicy quote in there. And that's where, like with Colby, he had the line about how Usman's going to need therapy after after I beat him or whatever, right? Like. That's kind of an interesting line. So that went up there. Interviews at 60,000 views. One of the highest rated interviews I've ever had in my life. But that's why. If I just put Colby previews fights against Kamaru Usman, it's not going to get as many hits. It's clickbait. It is 100% in that regard, but it's because of the subject I'm dealing with. Like if I'm dealing with someone else, like it's going to be a different interview, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm really torn on the whole Colby Covington thing because as much as I find, him so gimmicky, right? And I'm not begrudging him. I'm just like, it's not something that causes me to watch television or to watch his fights. I'm not, Colby Covington is an asshole. I better watch him get beat up. I just don't want to be around it. It's just not who.
But on the flip
am.
side of this, on the flip side of this, like I see it from his perspective in the sense that everyone's been the guy. Okay, so he fought Lawler. He hadn't fought since the previous June when he fought RDA and he won the interim title, right? How many times did you hear Colby Covington's name over that last year compared to someone like Kamaru Usman? You heard about Colby way more, and it's because he's doing all this. And yes, it's unfortunate, and yes, you'd like him to tell the truth and not lie and not go on this whole thing, right? But it's unfortunately that's what's kept him in the news, and that's what's gotten him these fights. That's part of the reason he's got this title shot. Go back to when John Fitch fought. Remember John Fitch when he was in the UFC?
Sure.
He was beating everyone, and he would not get a title shot because, I mean, he eventually did. But it took him forever because he was a wrestler. He would outgrind the opponent. Colby's not that much different. I mean, really, I mean, he's not getting first round finishes. He's not going out there. He's out cardioing these guys. He's using his wrestling. He's very similar. So unfortunately he has to make this. Now I'll tell you honestly, like off camera and everything else, Colby's one of the easiest fighters to work with. I can text him. I can get an interview right away. You know how many fighters are divas and they're like, they give, the cold shoulder, or they won't answer their texts, or they'll listen. Like if people knew that this is how Colby is kind of outside of it, they'd understand more of what he's trying to do. But yeah, some of the stuff he says is ridiculous and I don't agree with it. But I'll tell you on like an outside of the cage level, he's very accessible and very easy. And I wish more fighters would understand that, to know that you need to, promote yourself a little bit more through interviews, through whatever.
So if Elias Theodorou is wearing a "Make Canada Great Again" hat and, saying ridiculous shit, is he still in the UFC?
I think it might have helped, but it's got to be something where I think Elias has done such a good job of being this sort of this what's the word? I don't want to use a wrestling term because you're going to get upset with me, but like something like where people like he's sort of like a hero, right? Like people look at him, he's a good looking guy, whatever, he's done all this. That's been his shtick. For him to turn on that and start saying, Canada, these Americans suck or whatever, I don't think it would go over so well. Whereas Colby really had no identity before this, right? So it's like, I think that it'd be difficult. But yeah, I think if Elias was like, because Elias is off-putting to a lot of people. Like even me, I sometimes I find his stuff a little too much in the sense that like he's going for the woke crowd, like a little bit, like with some of the stuff he's saying, like trying to be the purity police and all that. That's going to win a lot of people over. Not a lot of fight fans though, I don't think. So that's where I don't think that's helped. And I think that his fight style and just like he gives some clever interviews, but it's not the type of stuff that's like really like stuff that you're going to see on every site, right? So that's where you do have to kind of go that route. And with Cejudo, like, because I asked Demetrius Johnson about this, I interviewed him recently, and I said, what do you think of this? Because like, whatever. And he's like, it's working. He's like, I was one of the greatest fighters ever in the UFC. Well, he didn't actually say that, but something along those lines where he's like, look, I beat all these guys in the flyweight division. I defended the title a number of times. People just didn't care. And they put DJ on how many pay-per-views, and it still didn't translate. People were walking out the door.
They tried to make DJ happen. They definitely tried to make
they
DJ.
did. And so, it's one of those things where you have to be invested. And that's why, like, with Colby, so many people hate him or so many people like him that it makes you feel a certain way about him.
Is it working for Cejudo though? Like Colby, you can make the argument is working. Even if it's not working for me, you can make the argument is working. Cejudo, are people really buying any more 125 pound, 135 pound title fights because of his cringe gimmick or whatever you want to call it?
We're talking about him here. He's injured. He's not going to be back till January. I see that guy's name in the headlines every week. To a certain degree, it is. I think Colby, as far as shticks go, I think Colby's actually being a bit better in that sense because Cejudo's wanting to fight women. They've even put out. Someone asked me. I forget who asked me this the other day. We're talking about how
that's right out of the Andy Kaufman playbook, isn't it?
Of course, yes, exactly. Yeah. But someone even asked me about the odds that they put odds out. Like, don't you think this is disrespectful? I was like, no, that odds book's smart because like people are talking about it because they put the odds out. Like, obviously it's never going to happen, but I think what Cejudo's doing, it's different, but it's still keeping his name in there. And unfortunately, when you're injured, you have to do that. I mean, it would be great if fighters would be more self-aware and be like, hey, I'm going to do a video blog while I'm out. I'll do one every day and you can see my updates and I'll do interesting and fun stuff. But to me, it's like him taking this route is almost lazy, but it's winning. It's in the sense that people are talking about it. We're talking about it, right?
Do you think you want to fight Cyborg?
Cyborg would kill him.
I know.
I've been beside Cyborg. She's big.
Yeah, she is a large woman. And now she's in Bellator, and she's apparently going to fight Julia Budd. And,
well, not apparently. That's confirmed. That was there. I was there last weekend. Yeah, it's at the Forum, January 25th. So.
All right, and Julia Budd, one of the best 145ers in the world. Cyborg finally fighting a real 145 That to me is an interesting matchup. What's your read on that? And well, we'll go to that afterwards. Okay. Well, what's your read on the fight first and foremost?
I think it's great. And I think for Julia Budd, this is the fight that will really get her the respect she deserves, because people forget that she's fought so many good fighters, like even dating. And people, it's so funny. Like because I interviewed Julia, she was in LA, and I know Julia quite well because she's obviously at Gibson's, which isn't too far away from where I live. Yeah. And all these people are like, yeah, but she lost to Amanda Nunes. You dumbasses. She lost to Amanda Nunes in her second pro fight in 2011. That's like saying Jorge Masvidal won't beat Nate Diaz because Al Iaquinta beat him at lightweight. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So, right. Like, I think for Julia, I think her beating a Cyborg would be huge. And for Cyborg, it can really be her division in Bellator, and they can really build on that. And to be honest, it's such a good move for Bellator with them getting Cyborg, because Julia, while she was, beating her opponents and stuff like that, there isn't a lot of fan investment there. Like, yeah, she's getting these highlight reel wins. Like, she finished her last two opponents, which is great. But like, the Cyborg fight is just it adds such a more of a thing there, because there is, whether you love or hate her, people do feel a certain way about Cyborg with, whether you're team UFC or team Cyborg, it doesn't matter. It's a huge fight. And to be honest, it's hurting the UFC, because who the hell is Amanda Nunes going to fight at 145 now?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've kind of modified my attitude towards Cyborg because, as you know, I was a pretty big anti-Cyborg guy for years and years, with the steroids, and I didn't like her, like kind of like bullying social media persona and whining social media persona, like, oh, the rules should be shifted to gear towards me. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that maybe Cyborg had little to nothing to do with that. That may have been Ray Elby or whoever on Cyborg's team, especially with that doctored video coming out.
Yeah.
And that's where I was really like, wow, I don't think Cyborg in her heart of hearts would have consented to that. So what is your read on that? And has that affected your attitude towards her at all?
Well, I've interviewed her, and I've interviewed enough fighters where I kind of get a sense of how they are, like even off camera and stuff. And I've never got that sense from Cyborg, like just the times that I have interviewed her, where she would do something like that. I mean, it's absolutely her team. They do some really dumb things on social media. I don't know why. I remember they're leading up to the Spencer fight. They were doing these polls, like, what's your favorite food? Like, what marketing person is telling you like that's a good idea? Like, you should be talking about your fighter and talking about like stuff going into it. So yeah, I think she has some bad people around her as far as that goes. And yeah, the doctored video was just a bad look all around. And who knows, she might still be in the UFC, but I really feel like Bellator is going to be a better fit for her, because even aside from all that stuff, I think the UFC was never that, like, I don't know. I don't think they were ever fully in with Cyborg to a certain degree. I know they tried, but like they were really in. They would have done a better job building up that division, and they didn't really. They moved up a bunch of 35ers. I think they just didn't. They didn't forecast that it was going to be like a stuck thing, like the featherweight division. So they kind of just had to deal with it and move on and stuff. So I don't believe she's like that as far as some of the stuff that happened with her.
So I guess that begs the question. I mean, why retain those kind of people around you?
I don't know. Maybe it's you'd have to ask her that. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure it's been discussed long and hard and everything like that. I mean, she got the Bellator contract. I know she does. She's with Paradigm, I think, for her management, which also manages like like Wonderboy Thompson and McGregor and a few of the other notable fighters or whatever. So that's, I mean, I guess from that perspective, that's probably helping her to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But also yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I'm not sure why. Maybe loyalty. I'm not sure.
Well, loyalty can be misplaced, but loyalty is a great thing, and family is a great thing too. And you're a dad now. This is the first time we've ever, got to sit down and talk about that. How's the little one doing?
He's great. Thank you for asking. He just turned 2 last month. So he's getting to that really fun age, as where that you can start to communicate and stuff. And he just this week was in his we switched him from the crib to like a full out bed now. So that's good. But it's great. Like that's been one of the benefits of me even making the switch was leaving my day job, being a freelancer, going to this job, is that I'm home a lot. So I get to spend a lot of time with him, which is great. So he goes to daycare, but I still get him ready in the morning. I have enough time to take him to daycare. I pick him up from daycare. That's actually where I'm going after this. So it's been great from that perspective. perspective, and just to see, just to get to try and more from how I think like a human should be raised or whatever has been kind of fun, so it's been good. And being back in Vancouver has been great because my family's here. So I do have a lot of help. Like that first year when it was just Trish and I on our own, basically, and she had her family, but they're up north. It was a lot more difficult. Now having that help is such a relief. Like I remember, I think the first year we didn't go out for dinner once, like just the two of us. It was always just, we had to watch Landon. So now having that support has been a big help. And it's great for my family too, because I've basically been away for, I don't know how many years, whenever I moved out to Ontario, 2003. I mean, that's how long it's been. So it's been nice to, be able to kind of reconnect with my family and get to see them more on a regular basis. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it's amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah, that age is really fun because, like you say, you get an influence, right? You get to be able to kind of mold them in your own graven image. But of course, they always surprise you with their own independent streak. Yeah, you're always amazed how. Am I negotiating with someone who's this tall? How the hell did this happen?
Yeah, and yeah, I think, and he's at the age too where, like, if you change something on him, he'll get upset, which I'm sure you've had to deal with. Where it's like, like that's something where you just have to negotiate with them. You got to be like, look, no TV right now. We got to eat breakfast, or we got to no TV. We got to go to bed and all that stuff. And you just sort of have to deal with it. And he learns and he understands. But yeah, I just it's so cool to to have that other part of what I'm able to do in my life is just like having him and like being able to like see him and interact with them and play with them. And we're really like focusing on getting him outside. And that's one of the great things with his daycare is like they go outside no matter what, even if it's raining. So that's been great where we're just, he's getting to do all the stuff that I got to do because I moved back to basically my hometown. So it's he's getting to do all the stuff that I got to do, which is great.
And do you notice that they start picking up like verbal cues from you? Like I didn't realize I didn't realize I had so many like affectations in my speech until they started getting repeated back to me. Like my little one, the first time she went, "This guy," I'm like, "Whoa." Oh, I guess I do say that a lot.
Yeah, no, I do notice that too. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something specific that he says, but yeah, there have been moments where I was like, well, you're like, or he'll just say something. You're like, where the heck did he? Like, I didn't teach him that or whatever. Like, he just learned stuff at daycare or whatever, right? So it's been cool to watch that. Like, it seems like every week it's like adding a new, kind of wheel to his tool to his tool shed, so to speak. It's been really cool to watch that because he's at that really fun age right now where like you can actually like interact and talk to him and stuff, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I remember mine being about that age, and we were watching, it was the Bisping Anderson Silva fight, right? So I've got her in the crook of my arm, and we're watching it, and of course I think Anderson Silva's won the fight by knockout by this point, so I'm like, yeah, and then, she's like, yeah, and then like all of a sudden, it gets called back. And I jump up, throw my arms here, and I go, "What the fuck?" And of course, monkey see, monkey do. She jumps up, "What the fuck?" And I'm like,
"Oh man, yeah."
Oh, I'm getting a call from daycare, aren't I?
Yeah, no, I'm very conscious of that too, as well. Like you just have to, yeah, they watch everything, so you got to be really on the ball with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm just glad that you're in the position that you're in, James Lynch, because it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I've said this to other people off camera is that some people maintain relevance in this business by taking, and you always seem to maintain relevance by giving. And I've always admired that about you, and I wish you nothing but future successes and happiness and health and all that good shit.
Well, thank you very much, man. It's great. It was so great to reconnect with you here. I mean, we've talked and stuff, but it's nice to actually sit down and do a podcast again. I'd love to do it again. It's always good to catch up with you and see how things are doing. And yeah, I mean, I'm thankful. I'm really thankful. Like I do sit around a lot of the time and go like, how did I do this? In the sense that like, I wasn't sure if this would ever happen, if it would happen. I mean, how this industry is. There's a lot of politics in it. I feel like I've put the work in, but you never know, right? Like so, I'm just riding the wave, and my mentality is always going to be the same. This could end tomorrow, so I always just have to try and get better, try and evolve. Try and just you mentioned the giving back thing. It's something I do get. People ask me a lot of questions and things like that. Like I just don't see a reason why you wouldn't do that. Like to me, like I've had people that have helped me. It's my way of sort of giving back. I think that we live in sort of a society that's in some ways selfish where they're like, oh, I don't need to do that. I don't have time for that. It's the same way I treat interviews. It's like, if there's a fighter that I think is interesting, I will interview them. That's why, I still try and interview the prospects because that's important. And to me, it's just, I think that stuff always comes back. And I think if you can help someone out by doing something so small, like whether it's answering a question, it's only going to benefit you in the long run. So I always feel like you do those good things, it does add up in the long run. So maybe that's what it's been. It's been a lot of just good karma building up, and here we are. So I'll take it.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Well, I appreciate that. The checks in the mail, although it might take a while, international shipping and everything like that. So
I know it's the worst. I've lived in Taiwan for 4 years now. I've never actually known my address.
Oh wow!
I
but
literally
you moved
have
around
no
a lot
idea.
too. You're kind of like a nomad in that sense, right?
Well, no, I'm not mad. Who says I'm mad?
Well, I said nomad. Yeah, like you're sort of on your own, right? You sort of just go by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, but even on like my ID card, my address is in Chinese, so I'm like, I don't know where I live. I just kind of like whenever I'm in a taxi, I learn like the closest landmark or the closest intersection. So now when I want to go home, I'm like Dadun Lu Dadun Chi Jie, which is the intersection of Dadun Road and Dadun 7th Street, and I can walk from there, kind of thing. But yeah, my mom always asks me, well, what's your address? And it's like, I don't know. And like I just signed papers on a new place, and my name is not anywhere on the thing. My poor friend's wife had to like basically sign everything for me because the contract's all in Chinese. So if I fuck up, it's on her shoulders. So thank you, Daphne. Yeah, life is definitely different here. But anyway, I know you got to go pick up the little one. Say hi to Trish and all those involved for me. Your dear mother as well, who still follows me on the social media for some reason. I don't know why.
She just keeps tabs. It's funny. She'll like talk to me about stuff. Like she's up to date on everything, and it's kind of weird. But I'm just like, well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad she's taking an interest. So, can't ask for a better mother than that. So it's been great. She's lurking in the background. So no one here will actually figure out who it is. But yeah, she's there.
Yeah, exactly. She's doing the social media thing right, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. Just keeping a low profile. But no, seriously, thank you for having me on. Anytime you want me on, let me know. I always like catching up with you and kicking it. And hopefully we'll see you back in this fair land at some point, man. There's always an extra room here in Vancouver if you decide to make the trek. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. We're talking about maybe February because that's Chinese New Year, and that's when I get all my time off, and it's not the nicest time to visit Canada, but it's on the table anyway. Anyway, James Lynch, the man, the myth, the legend. Plug your shit.
At Lynch on Sports, Twitter and Instagram, Score content. Follow it all on the youtube.com/thescore MMA. Trying to give you guys a little bit of something different than the other sites. So check us out, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thanks for having me on, Carlin. Appreciate it.
It was just fun to talk to you again, my friend. We should do it more often. At any rate, for this show, you can find all the social media bullshit at bardscast.com. And until next time, hey, things could be worse.